Federal research funding is often allocated on the basis of race, sex, ideological conformity, and other criteria that have nothing to do with the pursuit of truth and excellence. So, in your view, what are the risks and danger to Canadian research excellence caused by this DEI approach?
So you've identified that there's potentially a weighting towards one thing. You're not advocating for affirmative action for conservative professors, are you?
88% of college faculty are left-leaning versus the rest are right-leaning, and there's a clear imbalance there. So
DEI is a problem.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
The committee is meeting to study the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada. We are joined by David Freeman, Associate Professor from Simon Fraser University, and he is joining through video conference. We are also joined by Dr. Yuan Yi Yu, Assistant Professor of International Relations and International Law, Leiden University.
So, in your view, what are the risks and danger to Canadian research excellence caused by this DEI approach?
Thank you for this question. Firstly, this is not hidden, If you go on the website of any of the research councils, there are pages which are dedicated to, their DEI policies. There are, programs which are very specifically tailored to advance certain viewpoints, to advance certain minority groups. And the truth is, look, research is about, I believe, the pursuit of truth and excellence. And if you tell researchers beforehand, well, we may give you money as long as you do research which checks these boxes in EDI, which where you get money if you are of a certain race or whatever. That already, firstly, that shrinks the pool of people who are eligible, People who do not fit certain, who don't have these personal characteristics don't get the money. People who want to do certain types of research which are less fashionable, which are less ideologically on board with EDI, don't get the money. So the money goes to a smaller pool of people, and very often this encourages people to lie about actually what they actually want to research, So as a researcher, when I do a grant proposal, I have to think, this is what I want to research. What do they want to read in terms of the proposal? So, you are encouraged actually to be actively dishonest. And moreover, as I think Dr. Freeman also pointed out, a lot of the money goes to a number of very ideological researchers. And I'm not saying that they should not get any money. I'm saying that they should not get special treatment.
It's interesting, in effect, people are committing academic dishonesty by having to lie on an application to ensure they can get a program funded on research excellence. And I think there's something wrong with that system when we're creating a system like that. Mr. Freeman, you recently wrote an article that was published in the Hub titled "Canada's Universities Have Lost Their Way. So why do you keep giving them public money with no strings attached?" In the opening paragraph, you observe something is seriously wrong with universities. So what are some of those issues that you have observed and identified that lead you to this claim?
Thanks very much for the question. So, for me, as a Jewish faculty member, the kind of response after October 7th, really hit home. How, seeing many faculty kind of celebrating the Hamas massacre, that really hit home for me. And I could talk more about that, and then also the outwelling of support for that side following that. That really hit home. But, I think that there's, that's just a symptom of a much, much larger problem. And, why don't I talk about kind of the other facets of it? I think that the ideological imbalance, cancel culture that, has been documented in various sources. I think these are really deep problems if we want universities to be places that promote truth, promote discourse across diverse viewpoints, and build knowledge that, serves Canadians that Canadians can trust.
I think you did mention that. I mean, that notion of the truth. You talked about in your opening comments about activist research. And instead of the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of activism kind of slants the findings of what the research you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's certainly in some disciplines. And, for some researchers, it's a continuum. it's very hard to draw a hard line as to what's activist, what's not. But I think if you say believe that the truth is highly subjective, if you believe that what you say contributes to a discourse that contributes to power relations, you might very well want to be selective in the evidence that you use in order to promote one side, perhaps say promote whoever you think happens to be more oppressed. Just a sort of one kind of ideology within the broad spectrum of kind of the academic idea space. I think that what I'm calling more broadly activist research is very well ingrained in parts of academia. I'm not saying that
Professor
we should
Freeman, if I
get rid of
could,
it.
because I've only
go
got
for it.
about 15 seconds left. A previous witness last week, or just on Monday, appeared, and one of her concerns with regards to the research funding that is being shared is she's saying there's very little monitoring of the monies that go out. And do you agree with that comment?
True, but it's really hard to understand as a researcher, like what's the useful direction that I should go when I write the grant application. If I'm writing a grant application, honestly, it's for research I haven't actually done. And, I might, early in the research, I might learn something and take a bit of a different direction. And so
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. Maybe you will get an opportunity in the second round. 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I just want to maybe start by clarifying some things, because there's some things that were said earlier that I just want to make sure were not, that Professor Freeman are not attributed to you. I mean, you made some comments about protests on campus, and, as somebody who has spoken out on making sure that the Jewish community is able to feel safe and secure in this country as often as I possibly can, including with some fairly obnoxious anti-Semitic protesters on the Hill day before yesterday. I want to make sure what I didn't hear you say is that people who support the Palestinian cause are inextricably linked to terrorist organizations. I just want to make sure that's not what you said, because that's what I heard. I just want to make sure that's not what you said.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because these committees end up clip factories. I want to make sure that that's not what you said. Okay.
No, it was a specific subset of some people who are associated with that cause.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I mean, you talked a lot about the importance of diversity of thought, and I agree with you. I think it's really important for. I think my colleague across thinks it's funny that I said that, but as somebody who actually had professors that were conservatives, you might have heard of Robert George, who's a very famous conservative of my professors.
No crosstalk, please, like one person at a time. So no
some
remarks
respect from the colleagues across would be appreciated, but I know that might be hard for them.
Can I stop the clock? Please, no crosstalk, like the time is for MP Nur Mohammed. He's not addressing you, so please. This is his round of questioning, and he should be allowed to do the round of questioning. No crosstalk. All the questions should be addressed to the chairs, and I really want to have decorum in the meeting. And we are all adults in the room, so we should.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, to Professor Freeman. I just want to make sure that when we talk about the importance of diversity of viewpoints. That we shouldn't be caring about the political proclivities of our physicists or our scientists, of our biologists or our mathematicians, right? We're not saying that should be of concern to us.
That's my take. I mean, it does have some, kind of knock-on effects later in terms of thinking about university governance, which is, collegial governance, but that's second order, and that's definitely second order to what the committee's looking at.
Okay, so to be clear, we shouldn't care if 97% of the physicists at SFU happen to vote a particular way.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Okay, and so we shouldn't care whether or not 97% of or 98% or 92% of our mathematicians happen to be liberal or conservative. That should not impact anything, correct?
Pretty fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be clear then, some of the culture war language that we're hearing here should not really be something that we sort of focus on. We should be focusing on the quality of academic rigor, correct?
Yeah, I think we should be focusing primarily on academic rigor, but I do in disciplines where, researcher kind of biases are, do come into play. I think then we don't want to think carefully about representing the diversity of ways of moral reasoning and diversity of political reasoning of Canadians, and it's a tricky problem. So
you've identified that there's potentially a weighting towards one thing. You're not advocating for affirmative action for conservative professors, are you?
I think it's tricky. I think if you're going to do EDI, I think that would be the number one target you'd have for your EDI. Personally, I'd be pretty happy if, we just got rid of EDI and adjudicated things based on merit. But, I think there's a pretty good argument for, especially in some fields where, researcher biases do play a role in what gets produced.
And how would you make sure you're not getting lower quality research in that regard then?
Yeah, in these in fields where researcher bias can get in, it's inherently subjective, right? And, as we agreed, we're not talking about physics, mathematics, or whatever, where, research quality is like you're curing cancer.
Right.
So yeah, is there a trade-off? I don't know, but the whole evaluation is highly subjective, and the subjective social sciences, and so that's a tricky problem.
Have you found that the research quality of your colleagues who come from what I guess has been called diversity-seeking backgrounds to be lower quality than others?
Yeah, so my colleagues, let me confine that to economics, since that's where I have the most expertise to do disciplinary evaluation, and I don't think so. I haven't really thought about it actually. Say no. It's we generally hire based on merit.
So if we're hiring based on merit, as you're saying, you're hiring based on merit, and you have not seen a diminishment of quality, you have not seen that the quality of the research has been diminished because a more diverse group of professors or academics have been recruited. How do we handle this and making sure that we continue to have academia that reflects the population, but that doesn't diminish the quality of research? Because you're just saying to me, that it doesn't diminish the quality, has not, in your experience, diminished the quality of the research, but at the same time, we're saying that we need to be doing something different.
Yeah, so keep in mind, economics is very much a positivist discipline. So, we are very much committed to truth, to using data to answer questions. And so, I think there's a lot less room for researcher bias, although, if we had more conservatives, there'd probably be more research on things like productivity, or the negative effects of government bureaucracy. So,
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up for Mr. Noor Mohammed. And with that, our second round of questioning comes to an end.
Is there a tendency to influence researchers in their very ability to explore topics in an independent fashion? Yes, there's a self-censorship that sets in. It depends on the topic. People realize that they have to cover certain issues discreetly and present their research activities in a specific fashion. They have to make sure they don't say anything that's not popular. The other effect of censure is really ongoing among scientists based on their points of view. It should be a free community. I shouldn't have to think, if I publish this, my colleagues will have a poor opinion of me because of my personal opinions, et cetera, et cetera. Given the level of international competition for talent, should this issue be something we address in order to make sure we continue to draw foreign talent? In Europe, in the United Kingdom, in various areas in Europe, Canada has developed a reputation as an excessively woke country. And this is not something that my colleagues to the right say. A number of people say that they actually don't want to work in Canada because their, access and EDI and so on is just kind of over the top. So there is a negative effect on our talent searches. Scientists want to carry out their own research. They don't want to spend their time conforming to EDI requirements. And the opinion is that if you come to Canada, you'll have to do that.
So you mentioned a lack of political sort of viewpoint diversity in universities, and I think there was a study shown that 88% of college faculty are left-leaning versus the rest are right-leaning, and there's a clear imbalance there. So I just want to get your perspective on how how that plays out in your world and in your experience as faculty and as your experience as a student, and just understand how the Liberal government has let us get to this stage.
Yeah, thanks for the question. There's lots of different studies, not as many on Canada, lots on the US, and it does vary based on discipline. So luckily, I'm in economics, and yes, there's maybe a 4-to-1 like liberal to conservative kind of ratio, but lots of people are in the center, kind of center left. And, people are pretty tolerant. I have good relations with in my own department. How does it work at a university? Well, if you have people who are higher, instead of just focusing on the left to right ratio, like think about the ratio of people who are on the far left and would self-identify as such relative, and I'm not talking like your liberal voter, like people who are on the far left, the ratio of them to, people who are kind of on the right, center right, whatever. There's far more people on the far left.
What are some examples of that far left activism?
Yeah, so the buzzwords you'd hear, Marxist scholarship, critical race theory. People would use those as examples of kind of leftist, as activist forms of scholarship that tend to be associated with far left politics.
Yeah, wouldn't you agree that like the funding that comes from the government or from tax dollars, and you would expect a balanced, apolitical view of things, and it's just not happening at university faculties. Would you agree with that it's just not, there's a total imbalance? And you think that there should be strings attached to the money too, right?
Yeah, so I don't know about strings attached. Research, it's really hard to predict the results of research in advance. So I don't know so how you want to think about strings attached. That's very tricky. But I would say that, yes, there is a political imbalance in faculty. That's almost beyond dispute. And it's most extreme in disciplines where, that aren't positivist, that are more subject to researcher biases, in interpretive social sciences and humanities.
Mentioned about October 7th and, there's sort of the anti-Semitism that we've seen all across the country, and Jewish faculty and Jewish students have had to experience. Could you tell me a bit about your experience?
Yeah, I wrote a brief for the House Justice Committee. Seeing people politicizing the university, trying to, pass a motion to, an anti-Israel motion at my union. That was very disheartening. Also seeing the students kind of speaking up for Palestine when, as faculty kind of aligning with them, joining groups like Faculty for Palestine or Students for Justice in Palestine, which, are kind of in bed with kind of Sami Doon and Hamas, where there's clearly links with that. Faculty from my university were at the UBC, anti-Israel encampment with members from Sami Doon.
Your voice is now suppressed and you feel less safe as a result of this, and maybe you can't exercise your full freedom of academic freedom as a result of this?
Look, as people have tried to politicize the university in various ways to say, like, push divestment from arms manufacturers, which I definitely oppose, my views have come out. So you know what, like, you can't find my office location online. I lock my doors, make sure people don't know where I live.
Wow.
Like, it's a new reality. Like, Jewish people have gotten used to this kind of thing over the generations, and I just got to get used to it.
Do you agree that the government should do something about this?
Yes.
Wow. What can they do about it, do you think?
So first, remember that universities are primarily provincial jurisdictions. So, so first, in terms of thinking about the allocation of SHRC funding across disciplines, I think that's number one, since this kind of activism at the university level, it is coming from somewhere. It's coming from these kind of far left activist movements. So number one. Number two, in thinking about what conditions are attached to the indirect costs of the indirect research funding. I'm not saying, withdraw people's grants, but there's a big slush fund of money going to universities that they're using to pay administrators and stuff like that. You might consider some policies and making that conditional on some policies.
Federal tax dollars goes into it, so indirectly it is tied to the federal government, and whether it's funding or ultimately trickles down to the faculty, to the administrators, and essentially has created this space that has suppressed voices that are dissenting, even Jewish voices, but also voices of.
Sorry, Mr. Rojo, your time is up.
I'd like to bring up the summary of evidence provided to the Science and Research Committee by the Library of Parliament, titled "The Impact of the Criteria for Awarding Federal Funding on Research Excellence in Canada." One item that stands out is the research provided found that 88% of the university professors surveyed in Canada identified politically as left-leaning, which is very alarming. Also noted, with regards to DEI programs, a series of criticisms were made regarding the DEI measures, policies, and programs implemented by universities and granting agencies. First, several witnesses believe the DEI funding criteria were not ideologically neutral. Second, witnesses noted that they believed the risks lead some researchers self-censor or include a DEI statement even if they do not endorse it. Third, witnesses suggested that researchers may even use artificial intelligence tools to write DEI statements in their applications. Fourth, several witnesses recommended that such diversity statements be removed from funding applications. Fifth, some testimony suggested that DEI measures are discriminatory. Six, some witnesses argued that by focusing on gender and ethnicity, some DEI measures could be discriminatory. Seven, the committee was also told that DEI policies are generally unpopular and may trigger negative reactions against the groups they are meant to benefit, as well as undermine the reputation of academia. And 8, other witnesses reported that the DEI criteria complicate the funding application process and place a burden on researchers. As Professor Steve Pinker mentioned on Monday, DEI is a problem. Canada is seriously limiting its potential of being a leader in science and research by prioritizing identity over merit. We should be recruiting our best and brightest to advance progress in these critical fields. Now, my question is to Mr. Freeman. You posted an article in the Hub titled "Canada's Universities Have Lost Their Way, so why do we keep giving them public money with no string attached?" At the top of the article, you say, quote, "There is ample evidence that higher education in North America and across the West is not adhering to the social contract implied by its public funding." You mentioned one of them as being the excesses of DEI. May you please expand on that?
Yeah, so I mean, since we're talking about funding today, I should mention that, say, in SHRC in particular, when I submitted grants, it didn't have EDI criteria, or when I adjudicated. So in terms of excessive DEI, I've certainly heard examples from people who've submitted grants to CIHR and to NSERC. I mean, I can think a mundane example is, currently SHRC does allocate some graduate scholarships by race. In terms of, EDI, just kind of a mundane example, my own faculty, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at my university, it lists a bunch of different, has a strategic research plan. Other universities have similar ones. Like one of their, I think, 3 major commitments is to EDI. It seems extreme that that's like one of your 3 major kind of cross-cutting commitments. For me to hear people talk about EDIs and, kind of go and, raise the pride flag and have it such an inclusive environment, and then it's like, oh, well, my next meeting is scheduled on Yom Kippur. Well, it just rings hollow to me. And when people argue for EDI and say, oh, it's because we want to include everyone, we want to have a diversity of viewpoints, and then there's like almost no conservatives in academia, to me, there are potentially good cases for EDI, but if you take them really seriously, EDI has been a failure in practice. And this problem, a lack of conservatives in academia, this has gotten much worse in the EDI era of the last 10 years or so.
Okay, so my next question is for you, Dr. Zhu, and you mentioned scholars are taught that the way to get ahead is to use buzzwords. What do you think is the impact of this pursuit of trendy topics on research excellence?
Look, there's always going to be trends. We are human beings. Human beings are social animals. We like to do what other people are doing, right? But I think, I cannot recommend highly enough the report by Dr. Snow from MLI, where he has a page where he looks through all the abstracts submitted to, I think, SHRC for funding for between, in the last 5 or 10 years, and he looks at a number of words, right, and their incidence, and you can see the, words like, equity or racism just going like this, going up like this, and I think, that really diminishes the sort of, questions we answer, and that, it encourages like group thinking at the expense of intellectual diversity.